Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Department of Personnel and Training has been asked to prepare a proposition on lateral entries into civil services that deal with the economy and infrastructure. As per media reports, the instructions have come from the Prime Minister's office to prepare a broad outline of modalities for selecting private sector executives for appointment in the ranks of Deputy Secretary, Director and Joint Secretary. The report suggested that the decision was taken in response to a central government staffing policy paper. In the paper, DOPT had indicated a lack of officers at the middle management level. According to reports, the selection of private individuals or social workers would be through a matrix of experience and qualification. The existing salary of the candidate would not be taken into account. A committee headed by the Cabinet Secretary would be responsible for the final selection. The starting estimate was of around 40 individuals comprising of successful entrepreneurs, academicians and social workers would be taken in through lateral entry, mainly at the Joint Secretary level where there is a dearth of officers. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the rationale and impact of this move. Joining me on the program today are TSR Subramanian, former Cabinet Secretary, Mohan Guruswamy, Senior Economist, TK Arun, Editor, Opinion, The Economic Times, and Niraj Srivastava, former Ambassador. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Subramanian, I'd like to begin with you. What do you make of this move?
Well, one has to see the details. I think this is an important issue where you cannot. We have had past at least 2 or 3 times lateral entry situations in the past 30, 40 years. And the experience has not been bad. Secondly, with regard to senior people and in the service, we already had when I was Cabinet Secretary, out of 300 secretaries, we had 150 were from All India Services, 150 from outside. So we have experience of that. The question really comes, are we talking now of a short-term assignment from private sector into government, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or long-term? We have to look at this very, very carefully. By and large, when you talk of expertise, just give me half a minute on this point.
Sure.
When you talk, give me half a minute on this point. When you talk of expertise, water, energy, etc., are broad spectrum areas. Each one has 200 expertise. If somebody says he's an expert in water or in energy, he's a fraud. He's a fraud. It's not like that. The second is, the key point to note is, India is a highly corrupt system, particularly in the states. So if you allow people to come for 2 years and 3 years, they go without responsibility. It takes 20, 30 years for any cases to take place. You have no disciplinary control over the person. So broadly speaking, I would be in favor of lateral entry, provided it is a lifelong kind of association from for the next 20 years or whatever.
But so, so that some responsibility can be fixed is what you're saying. So that's some kind of
in and out, I would be against it broadly speaking, but then we have to look at the broad details.
Okay, indeed, we do have to wait for the broad details. The details as of now are very sketchy. But let me bring in TK Arun into the picture. You know, this is not the first time that this kind of a move has been looked at, like Mr. Subramanian has just pointed out. But coming to a point that the government last year, in fact, it was the Union Minister Jitendra Singh himself in front of Parliament who said that there is no question of lateral entry. Why the sudden U-turn?
You know, as Mr. Subramanian said, lateral entry has been happening. And as he also said, the outcome hasn't been bad. We have Dr. Manmohan Singh, things like Vijay Kelkar, who was Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who were lateral entrants and did spectacularly excellent jobs in the jobs they did. Now, this other point about what will they do after they leave the service. Now, should they be restricted to long-term service or not? Now, here I think in the UK, they do allow short-term lateral entrants to come and work in the government and leave. Now, there is a certain culture of trust, but beyond that culture of trust, there are also regulatory mechanisms and apparatus put in place to ensure that they do not misuse the role they assumed when they were in the government for any profit once they leave the government. And I think with that kind of adequate safeguard, it should be possible to make this work. And I would not say that why should this be limited to the infrastructure and economy areas. It should be across the board. No, why should an IAS officer who might be very senior but has only looked after animal husbandry and social welfare be more qualified to run the home ministry, be the home secretary, than an IPS officer who has done internal security all his life. So I think all senior positions, perhaps a deputy secretary or director level onwards, should be through direct recruitment, and those who are eligible should be everybody in the service, in the all India services, plus outsiders on an equal footing.
Sure.
I don't think lateral entry should be restricted to just people from outside the government service. Even government servants who might be junior but are competent should be eligible to apply.
True, that's a very fair point that you're making. You know, Mohan Guruswamy, as far as selecting some of these private individuals itself are concerned, how is the selection procedure going to take place? What has been done in the past?
I don't really know what was done in the past in detail, but I knew they were lateral entries. A lot of people got into the IAS and the Foreign Service laterally. But the problem is, like Mr. Subramanian said, if it's a short-term thing, it's not particularly a bright idea. So the interests are different, the motivations are different. If it's an entry into the service, which means you come in and you stay there at a certain seniority, then you have a chance to go up, then there's a motivation to keep you up. My problem is that, you know, the thing which draws, you know, slows down government is the absolute security of tenure in service, lifetime tenure, which you get in the government, which is not good for discipline, doesn't motivate people. And, you know, and you have this, everybody rises with seniority. So you have a peculiar situation. My home state of Telangana, a small state, has 7 DGPs, you know, and half a dozen chief secretaries. You have chief secretary for this, chief secretary for that. And, you know, so you made a mockery of a hierarchy, of a pyramid. So you need a pyramid, just like the services, the military services, you know, have a way of, you know, shedding people. As you go up, the pyramid gets steeper. That builds competition within inter-service and, you know, motivates people to do better, to lead better. And I think you need to get that kind of a system going. Here, once you're entered, you're there for all your life. Good, bad, indifferent, you will rise because your batch has become empaneled joint secretary, you also become.
Yeah.
When you become secretary, you become secretary. You get into a peculiar situation. Now, Mr. Subramanian just said 300 secretary level posts in Delhi. This is ridiculous. There was a time when secretary to government in Delhi was like God. He was a big man. Now every second guy is a secretary. Secretary for animal husbandry, secretary for Ayurveda. You know, you got to get rid of all this and combine them all together. And maybe have a new cadre of principal secretaries bunching together important ministries, you know, home, justice, all together into one ministry, and foreign service and defense into one. You know, have principal secretaries for it. But instead of that, we've got this preponderance of lateral positions. We're not good at all for the hierarchy. It destroys the hierarchy. There's no accountability. Nobody reports to anybody. You know, I remember when I was in government, my PA would ask for a meeting with a bunch of other secretaries. They would ask, what is his seniority? What is his batch? You know, do we come to his office or does he come to our office?
Our office, yeah.
You know, and there were times when I said, I'll come to your office. Don't worry, Ed. This negotiation is too much. And I even would go to a joint secretary's office. But this kind of thing slows government down.
Sure.
You got to get rid of it.
Okay, indeed. You know, Ambassador, I'm going to come to you because you belong to a different service altogether. You belong to the IFS. So, you know, something that was touched a little earlier about how it shouldn't be limited just to infrastructure and something. Do you see the scope of this being widened in the near future? And should it be widened?
Look, in principle, I am for the idea of lateral entry, but with certain conditions. The conditions is that it should be limited to posts where domain expertise is not available in the service itself, for example. If it is not available in the foreign service in a particular position like disarmament or other areas, well, by all means have a lateral entry. So it should not be a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. It should be on a case-by-case basis, because the idea is to draw in people, to recruit people who have domain expertise, which is what we are lacking
at the moment.
At the moment in a lot of places,
yes.
Other than shortage of officers. In the MEA, if the government feels after a thorough examination that there is a lack of domain expertise in a particular area, by all means they should recruit. And even now I believe that on a contract basis, outsider specialists are being engaged for advice. So this is the first thing. The second thing is the fairness of the selection process. Unfortunately, the former cabinet secretary referred to corruption, and my point is that the process of recruitment should not be corrupt. It should be transparent, above board. But the way many systems work in India, unfortunately, after that initial wave of enthusiasm, it degenerates into somebody's favorite, somebody, uncle and chacha, tau kind of thing. That would be terrible.
Right.
It would ruin even the existing system.
So we need to have a systemic approach.
So you need to, and I mean, you need to have safeguards in place to ensure that actually the right man is selected for the job,
right,
and not because he has some influence, political influence. So these are the things, and then of course the question of the tenure and other things will be there, and you have to look at it carefully.
Sure.
Because you on the one hand you have one extreme at the American system, where you have that revolving door policy. Those guys come for 4 years, the whole team come 3,000-4,000 people. Then the man is defeated in the election. Everybody goes out and becomes a lobbyist. Somebody is a lobbyist, somebody is an arms merchant, somebody becomes this, somebody becomes that. And that goes up right to the level of presidents.
Right.
I mean, you have Tony Blair, now Obama you will find after some time. All these fellows are, they become dalals, basically dalals, international dalals.
Okay.
The bigger you are, the bigger you get.
Sure.
That should not happen, and we need to have some safeguards to ensure
indeed
that these guys don't come here, go out and then, do something else.
Show you a dozen secretaries who are lobbyists today.
Yeah, so...
Okay, let's take the discussion forward. Mr. Subramanian, what kind of an impact is it really going to have on the bureaucracy? What kind of an impact is it going to have on civil service aspirants?
Before that, let me touch on two of the important points made by both Mr. Guruswamy and also Mr. and Ambassador. I'm very worried the word cabinet secretary comes, because don't think of it today. The present government is a fairly clean government in Government of India. State governments are not at all like that. In fact, the states are, they are galloping towards all kinds of bad administration now. And the chief secretary's post is now highly political post. So if the chief secretary starts selecting experts, etc., we will know exactly what happened in the telecom sector with one secretary and one minister tangoing. There can be huge disasters now. We have to be very extremely careful here. Secondly, UPSC has had an excellent record over 30-40 years, and therefore this is extremely important. Don't also undermine. I agree entirely with the ambassador that pick out those areas. Look, the career service officer is selected from the best in India, and he has seen cross-sectoral experience of 10-15 sectors. So there's a certain advantage at the man at the top arterial positions having a broad vision rather than extremely narrow. So we have to balance all these factors now. So how to select, how long? I would be very worried to have a Birla man or a Tata man or an Ambani man coming in for 2 years, wrecking the sector and going away, giving our legal system, it will take 30 years to convict him. So these are the kinds of issues we have to guard against. In principle, I think it is very nice, it's very good. Where we find the gap, we should find the right people from the private sector.
Okay, fair enough. TK Arun, a lot has been said about corruption. The bureaucracy and corruption has been, linked to each other, as well as the bureaucracy itself in India has got a lot of flack for its inefficiency. Do you believe that this move can possibly change that?
This by itself will not. See, cleaning up the bureaucracy has to begin with cleaning up the political system. Ultimately, they supervise and give the basic dynamics for the working of the bureaucracy. So unless the politicians allow the civil service to do a professional job, it cannot be faulted for not doing a professional job. So that is the first thing. Second thing, the current system is completely flawed. There is an incentive to not make any mistake. There is no incentive to do something right, because doing something right doesn't really get the kind of career progression that kind of doing right deserves. Whereas if you make a small mistake, you might be penalized. So people tend to play safe and not do anything. Now that is not the way to run a country as complex as India. So you have to change the incentive structure for promotion. So having lateral selection after a certain level of seniority within the government, where the field is thrown open not only to the private sector but to people in other parts of the government, will allow sufficient competition to be at play and get good people. And as Mohan said, those people who fail to make the cut should just retire. It's not necessary that everybody who joined the service should end up retire as secretary. Many people in the army retire as a colonel or brigadier. They don't go any further.
Right.
That should be the case in the civil service also. And they might be able to find some employment outside the service. Why not?
Sure. Yes, Ambassador, you wanted to point.
I just wanted to point out that in the actually probably 7 or 8 years ago, I know that in the MEA at least, the norms for promotion have been tightened very much. There is a point system now, and people are not getting promoted if they don't accumulate, they don't accumulate a certain number of points. So to say that everybody will become secretary is not true, at least in the MEA. I don't know about other services. People are not becoming joint secretaries. Forget about secretary. So there are now reports of compulsory retirements being done. So the process has already started. At DOPT knows about it. Probably the cabinet secretary might throw some more light on it. But this has already been done in MEA, and I'm sure that maybe there are some other ministries where too this thing is being followed. That not everybody becomes, as I said, even joint secretary. Forget about secretary. They're not given important postings. And now I read in the newspapers a few days ago that some people are being compulsorily retired after the age of 50. There is a review which will take place, a rigorous review, and by that time it is known whether you are good or not.
Right.
So if you are not,
you don't have to wait longer than that.
You don't have to wait. That's long enough. In
Yes.
fact, 10 years should be enough. But that is long enough.
Yes.
And if you don't make the cut, you'll be out.
I can see Mr. Subramanian raising his hand. Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Subramanian.
I want to focus on this particular point. A lot of us are Delhi based, and our vision looks at Delhi and Government of India. The 3/4 of the administration or more is outside Delhi. Now, Ambassador is perfectly correct. My estimate would be in every batch, out of 100, only 5 become secretaries. Only 5. And the norms that we have are 1 in 4 becomes joint secretary, and every 1 in 6 or 7. At the end, the filtering is like that. You see the people in Delhi, you don't see the people in the states. The issue really, the correct one is, we have to be ruthless at age of 50 to get people out. There should be 2 examinations, written examination, interviews, etc., to weeding out, one at 40 or 45 like the military, and at the age of 50 plus there. I think today the quality of the secretary is far better, number one. And look at the value of the secretary here. He will jump into a job, any private sector job, anywhere today. So don't discount his experience and his value. But don't also think of every IAS officer as competent. Senility comes very quickly. A lot of people are highly corrupt. But fortunately, UPSC and the system is still good enough to keep the good people out. I agree on the 50-year rule, more in the state governments than in Delhi.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Guruswamy, a systemic cleansing approach needs to be taken so as to ensure that we improve the bureaucracy. What else can be done?
One of the most important things you need to do is to have tenures. Important positions, secretary level positions should be tenures, because there needs to be continuity. There is this famous S.R. Das report. The average tenure of a district collector is 7 months and still valid today. And you get a district collector who's 7 years service junior, nobody cares for him in the district. I've seen district collectors when, 2 ministers go to a district, I've seen him serving dal and sabji to the ministers. Because there's so much at the beck and call of these guys, they can transfer them, move them out. So you need tenure of the district. A district should not have a collector anymore, should have a commissioner where everybody reports to him, and he has a tenure of 5 years or whatever, and he's assured everybody reports to him. Today you have a system where nobody reports to anybody. The education officer at one time reported to the collector in so many words. When the ICS was there, the ICS were chosen people, select people. Everybody reported to them, formally or informally. Today they don't even report formally. So you have serious problems of dysfunctionality in government. If you want to build a road, it goes over a canal, the education fellow comes in and he says, you can't build this road because you got to get my permission. So all this collector is there to override all it. So you got to upgrade that post. That's the bedrock of the civil service, the district administration. Now we've made districts smaller. You need senior people on top of a district. Make district small, put a junior fellow there, nobody listens to him. So I got to do a holistic reform is needed. I think people like TSR Subramanian, his expertise should be called into this, and and others also, non-government people, private people, management people. We can restructure a plan, but typically this will come out of the bureaucracy from the Dove courts of North Court, South Block, and then take care of seniority, different people's interests, and it will be one of those things. So you get a lateral entry, 2 years, nobody will care for that fellow. Some general manager from some company comes, and then he goes away.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Subramanian.
No, only a short point to sort of supplement what Mr. Guruswamy is saying just now. I did an analysis after the Supreme Court order of 3 years back, in which he was also in a very indirect way involved.
My daughter was there.
Analysis last week only I did. In UP in the last 2 years, there are 3 changes every year in district magistrates. 4 months to 5 months is the tenure. Every district is now controlled by a mafia. We are barking up the wrong tree. Absolutely. The problem, the rot is elsewhere. There is no force today to settle the sort of political situation and you see the kind of money in elections, etc., etc. Nobody is saying civil service is perfect. In fact, it has huge defects. But the much larger problem, as Mr. Verma said, is we have to go to the root of the problem. There has to be political reform. There is no move whatever in this regard. And once the politics is reformed, automatically, don't forget, at the end of the day, we got an excellent UPSC, and the best people in India come there. In other words, our basics are right, and the whole system is faulty from the top.
Sure.
See, the fifth pay commission report. The fifth pay commission report specifically recommended that any transfer which is a departure from the normal tenure of that person should be done only on the basis of the recommendation of a high-powered committee at the state level and for reasons that are recorded. Any transfer. Otherwise, everybody should have their full tenure and that should not be disturbed. Now, who failed to implement this recommendation? Now, this is a recommendation of the pay commission itself, which is manned by senior civil servants and some.
That is the Supreme Court's order.
No,
it's not pay commission. It's more than that. It's a Supreme Court directive.
I'm running out of time. I've got very few minutes left on the program. Make your point very quickly, Mr. Arun, and then I'll get closing comments from others
same point. So, unless the politics reforms itself, you cannot have an efficient civil service.
Sure. Yes.
Service from the itself is not futile.
2-3 quick points. One is, the civil service is an all India service. So you got to reform the all India service. You can't say, I'm reforming UP. You can't do that. Then you get the chief ministers aboard, reform the state. But also, I think, allocations of functions. Now, why do you have a secretary for animal husbandry, a secretary for Ayurveda, a secretary for... You have to combine a lot of these things into... After all, the United States is a much bigger economy. Britain is a much our size of economy now, smaller country. But they have very few posts. You have Minister for Home, he's got several things coming under him. Here we have, Minister of Justice, Minister for Personnel. So you start combining portfolios and departments, combine them together for more greater efficiency. So not only do you have to fix the number of bureaucrats, but you got to fix the number of departments.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Yes, Mr. Srivastava.
I think I can't emphasize enough what the Cabinet Secretary has said, that commission after commission has recommended that there must be a fixed tenure for the SP and the district magistrate. I mean, these officials in states. I don't know what happens to those reports. Nobody has, and today the situation is, forget about district magistrates and SPs, your even sub-inspectors are being appointed, your constables are being appointed by the chief minister. The rot has gone so deep that even at the ground level, I mean, the people are personally being picked by the chief minister and the home minister and this and that of the state. unless you have security of tenure, I am saying from experience, because in the MEA, we do have security of tenure.
Okay, sure.
We have 3-year postings abroad. When we come here, we are in the ministry. Nobody interferes with our posting. We have a fixed tenure. So
and that's the model that has worked, is what you're saying, and that's the model that we should take.
That's the model which works.
One month after Mr. Subramanian got his order of tenures, the Health Minister of India transferred his Health Secretary somewhere else. Said, I don't want him here. 1 month afterwards.
Sure.
And the man had just taken the job. Ghulam Nabi Azad said, I don't want this man here. And he was out on the street.
Mr. Subramanian, I'm completely out of time, but close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I'll just take half a minute to say this, that I think the lateral entry idea is a good idea if it is properly done, taking into account all the relevant issues. Secondly, the civil services of all sorts need reform, particularly in the states, also in Delhi. But the larger reform has to come in the politics itself. So these are all band-aid solutions. Somebody mentioned reports. There have been 300 reports since independence. You will see a continuous thread. The 2 or 3 key recommendations, Lokpal 1, 2, 3, 4, they have not been, all the recommendations regarding fixing a bulb here or giving a car to somebody else will be implemented. These one will not be. So I think we are barking up the wrong tree.
Sure.
The problems are much larger. We are trying to fix up the small holes.
Okay, fair enough. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank all my guests, TSR Subramanian, Mohan Guruswamy, TK Arun and Niraj Srivastava for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.